Hello, friends. It's Katie back with another episode of my vlog, and it's time for the Cinema Club Sunday Roundup. We had an interesting mix of movies this week, so let's jump right in at the beginning with The Host. I'm talking about the 2006 Korean horror movie directed by Bong Joon-ho, who, of course, is the director of Parasite and Mother and Memories of Murder and Snowpiercer, among other movies. After we had watched a few of his films, and then I told James that he had done a creature feature horror movie. Jimmy's a huge fan of monster movies, and so he immediately was like, I want to watch The Host next. So we did. It's a fantastic monster movie. The monster design itself is a little... It's supposed to be a mutated fish living in the Han River. The fish is like a result of chemicals being dumped into the city's drain system that's then drained into the river. And so I read that Bong Joon-ho really wanted to do a creature that looked like it could be believably a mutated actual creature. So there was a story apparently about a fish with an S-shaped spine that was found in the Han River. So that's what the basis of this creature in this movie is. So it's kind of, Henry described it almost as if a tadpole was crossed with the Incredible Hulk, which I like that description a lot. And I'm not giving you guys spoilers by telling you what the creature looks like, because this is an astounding monster movie in that they show you the full frontal monster, like 10 minutes into the movie. It's kind of astounding. Usually we spend so much of the movie, suspensefully building up to that reveal of what the monster actually looks like. But he just jumps straight into it with this movie and shows you the monster right away. The movie becomes about the main character's daughter, who's been presumably eaten by the monster, but it turns out she's still alive and in the sewer somewhere. And so the main character has to go find her and rescue her. But meanwhile, the government has announced that the creature was host to a deadly virus. And so anyone that has come in contact with the creature has to be quarantined. So suddenly this turns into like shades of contemporary, events and coronavirus and everything while we're watching the movie, because the main character and his family is being forcibly quarantined by the government. Now, later in the movie, it comes out that maybe the virus story isn't real and it's a government hoax that's been made up. And there's a whole part of the plot where there are people demonstrating and protesting in the street about this government hoax virus. So it was very weird to watch it now in this particular political and pandemic moment that we're having, if you will. But this is a great horror movie. Really great creature feature, great acting, great writing, great setups. Like I said, the creature design itself for me leaves a little bit to be desired. And there's some, 15-year-old computer animated stuff that hasn't aged very well. But other than those two things, this is a great, solid, really great creature feature monster horror movie. If you have seen any of Bong Joon-ho's other films, you're gonna like this one. If you are a horror fan, especially a monster or creature feature type of horror fan, you definitely owe it to yourself to check out The Host. We all totally loved it. It was great. Again, the kids were a little like, oh, what is this cheesy computer graphics from 15 years ago? And again, everybody was a little so-so on the actual monster design, but we had a ton of fun. It didn't get in the way of our enjoyment of this film at all. So, The Host, totally recommended. The next night after that, we switched modes completely and actually watched a documentary, Happy, Happy, Joy, Joy, the Ren and Stimpy story. This is a documentary that came out actually this year, 2020, last year. It's not 2020 anymore. Yikes. Came out in 2020, directed by Ron Cicero and Kimo Easterwood. And it is the story of John Kricfalusi and the Spumco gang and the rise of Ren and Stimpy and how the show got made and how it was originally produced and created and everything. And the documentary also deals with the more unsavory aspects of John K's personality, his mania, his sadistic tendencies, and ultimately him winding up grooming multiple underage fans to be his girlfriends, which is a really, really grody part of the story of Ren and Stimpy. And unfortunately, as a huge Ren and Stimpy fan, I wish I didn't know about it. I wish the whole thing didn't have to have kind of the tarnish of John Kay's reputation bound up in it. But that's what you get when you have auteur-driven media like the Ren and Stimpy show. It's clearly John Kay's show. The other artists at Spumco who he hired or who he got to work on the show with him obviously contributed a huge amount to what the show was and what it became. But ultimately, it is what it is because of John Kay. And so you can't really divorce him and his personality from the end product. So much of what goes on in Ren and Stimpy, so much of the pathos and just the way that creatures are treating each other, and the way things unfold in the stories is about his abusive tendencies and his background and the way he was raised and stuff like that. So you can't separate them at all. And like so much great art and art made by great artists, there's some kind of problem or some kind of craziness or some kind of mania or something that prevents this person from just being able to interface with people like normally in society. And so they put that into their art instead. And so in John Kay's case, what we got was Ren and Stimpy, which is still to this day one of the most amazing cartoons I've ever seen in my life. And boy, have I watched a lot of cartoons. I was basically the exact right age to get it and watch it when it came out. I was a teenager, and so it was perfect. I was just still close enough to being a kid that I was into cartoons, but old enough that I was like, no, I don't want to watch those little kid cartoons. So it was perfect. I used to watch Ren and Stimpy with my dad all the time. Hi, Dad. I know he's watching this. So it's really cool to see all that kind of behind the scenes stuff, all those interviews with the people who created this amazing, amazing, amazing cartoon that holds such a special place in my heart. But again, there's this massive, grody downside to the whole story, to John Kay's personality, and ultimately to this documentary, because they don't shy away from any of that. They completely cover it and talk about it really honestly. So an incredible documentary, totally recommended for any fans of Ren and Stimpy and any fans of weird animation in general. But if you are a fan of weird animation in general, you're a fan of Ren and Stimpy, because that's how that works. So happy, happy, joy, joy. The Ren and Stimpy story. Definitely check this one out. Again, if you're an animation or a Ren and Stimpy fan of any degree, you're going to like this one. Speaking of animation, the next night after we watched that, it was Jimmy's choice again somehow. Oh, because I did double picks last week. I couldn't remember how that worked. He had wanted to revisit The Point, the 1971 Fred Wolf directed animated. It's a short film. I think it's an hour long. It was a made-for-TV movie originally, which was made kind of side by side with The Point, The Record by Harry Nilsson. The record of The Point just tells the story and has the songs. But then in the movie of The Point, you also get the added visual element of the animation. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this story, but this is a great one. Kids who grew up in the 70s, which I am, most likely will remember this one. Either you had the record as a kid or you saw the movie as a kid. Sean actually came to this through the record. I came to it through the movie. And then as adults, we kind of traded media and each showed the other one, oh, hey, there's this whole other side of the story on this awesome Harry Nilsson piece. If you haven't heard of or seen The Point, it is a fable about a land where everything is pointed and everyone has points on their heads, except for our hero, Oblio, the star of the story, who's a little boy who's born with a round head instead of a pointed head for whatever reason. He gets into conflict with the local kid of a government person, and he gets banished from the land of Point and has to go off to the pointless forest with his dog Arrow. And the story is about Oblio and Arrow's journey through the pointless forest and the people they meet and the things that they learn while they're there. It is totally charming. It's a really, really sweet story. It's got great music by Harry Nilsson. It's just the type of thing that gets stuck in your head and just keeps replaying, but it's completely wholesome. If you are a fan of psychedelic-ish animation, Yellow Submarine, stuff like that, from the late 60s and early 70s. The Point fits right in there with kind of all that other stuff. And musically, obviously, it fits in obviously with that stuff as well. Now, the movie has an additional framing device that the record doesn't have. The record is just the story of Oblio and what adventures he has. In the movie, they have this framing device of a dad reading a bedtime story to his son. And then as he's reading the story, the kid imagines that he's seeing it on a television. I don't know why they decided to add that into the movie. I feel like it kind of detracts from the story of The Point. I imagine it was for timing purposes to pad it out and extend it a little bit, but also to help, kids of the early 70s get into the story by coming in with this kid who would rather be watching a TV show than listening to his dad read him a story. I think it falls a little flat. And ultimately, I prefer the version of The Point as told on the record than the version that's told in the movie. But I feel like the animation in the movie really adds a lot to your experience of the story. So all that is to say, I strongly encourage everyone to view and listen to both versions of this particular piece of media. It's interesting too because they were produced and kind of came out alongside of each other. It wasn't like the record came out first and then they made the animation. So they really complement each other well. And together, I think you kind of get the full package of kind of everything that this story can be. It's a really great one. I encourage you guys to give it a watch or a listen or both, especially if you have kids that you can share this with. It's great. I would say ages maybe like 6 to 12 is kind of like perfect for this particular piece. But I love it and I'm 44 years old. So there you go. So The Point, film directed by Fred Wolf, record story and music by Harry Nilsson. So check that one out. I don't think you'll regret it. Then just veering into completely other territory from The Point, the next night after that, we wound up watching Scream 2. Now, we watched Scream, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And the kids asked me at that point if there was a sequel. And I said, there's a bunch of sequels. And we kind of, for whatever reason, just didn't keep going with the franchise. So I reminded Henry the other day, I said, remember when we watched Scream and you were wondering about another one? Well, let's watch Scream 2. So we did. Scream 2 is pretty awesome. The first movie in the franchise obviously is the strongest out of everything. But I would say as far as sequels go, and especially a second movie in a multi-movie horror franchise, Scream 2 is really, really, really good. It might be the best second movie in a horror franchise, if that's a category. It's solidly self-aware. It takes place a year after the events of the original movie, and it opens with the release of the fake movie within the movie, Stab, which is the movie telling the story of the events that happened in the first Scream movie. So that's a cool kind of, tongue-in-cheek, very self-aware thing. And then we move from that scene into we're at college with the survivors of the first Scream movie, and they're like all taking a film class together where they're getting into arguments about whether sequels are any good or, what are the best or worst sequels that have been made. And it just becomes this very self-aware moment, just like the first movie is. And I think ultimately that is what is so successful and charming about the Scream movies. It's weird to use the word charming to describe horror movies, but it's like there's this kind of gimmick with it where you're watching teenagers who know what it means to be a character in a horror movie. And that's always great because, of course, how many times have we sat there watching a horror movie going, oh God, don't do that. No, that's so stupid. How could you make that move? And these guys think they know better, but do they? I'm not going to tell you because you'd have to watch the movie to find out what happens in Scream 2. I will say it is incredibly dated. I can't remember if the first one came off like this dated to me as the second one did, but wow. The combination of the fact that Wes Craven uses almost all of the actors in the movie are like stars of TV shows from the 90s. So they're these faces that you've seen on TV a ton during that time period. So there's that element. And then like the hair and fashion stuff is just like painfully 90s. And then the worst part is the music, especially the music on the end credits is just like the worst mid-90s music. I mean, like, I'm not a fan of 90s music at all. But it's like they picked the worst of 90s music to put in this movie. I don't know. It just, it did well at the box office. Maybe they like sold a bunch of copies of the soundtrack or something. But man, watching it now, all these years later, is just like so painfully dated. I wish it didn't quite have that much of the 90s in it. Again, I'm not a huge fan of 90s media, so it's kind of not a wrecker for me, but it definitely makes me like the movie less if it's just like, hello, it's the 90s. But that said, other than the fact that it is incredibly dated, great, solid slasher movie that's also a whodunit, just like the first one is, where, who is the murderer here? Who is the ghost face? I'm not going to tell you. You got to watch the movies to find out. It's definitely a fun ride. Wes Craven's a great director. Solid sequel and a solid franchise. He did a really great job with this one. So we will probably be getting into Scream 3 maybe next week after, something like that. So watch this space for that review. And the last movie we watched this week, actually last night, we watched In Fabric, the 2019 Peter Strickland film. Now, this was one that I had heard about and was on my radar, and I kind of had been wondering if I should watch it just with Sean, because it's an A24 movie, so those are always a little bit more adult. They have a little bit more sex content, a little bit more just kind of everything. But as you guys know, my policy is we watch whatever with the kids if they're interested, and then we talk about it. And so that's what we did with this one. So In Fabric is an amazing, amazing horror movie. It's like a horror and a dark comedy at the same time. It's very funny. Basically about a haunted dress. There's a woman played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste who, she's like recently divorced and she's kind of started dating and she has to kind of like get her mojo going. So she goes out to the store and she finds this red dress. And once she gets the dress and puts it on, basically is it trying to kill her or consume her or become her? Not sure what the motive of the dress is, and this sort of like witchcraft that's going on behind the scenes at the department store where she bought the dress. But it's very cool. It's very weird. It's a very strange concept. But mostly it's very stylish. It's very artistic. There's a lot of sort of unconventional decisions, parts where you're just seeing like a montage of still images that are almost a collage of magazine advertisements for dresses and other clothing. There's a lot of uses of mannequins in both still shots and moving shots. Lots of interesting use of lighting. Incredible costumes. The dress in question is pretty great, but the ladies that work at the department store have this crazy style that they wear, and the way that the department store is done up is like this interesting kind of it's very stylish and stylized and awesome. And then there's this weird bureaucratic dialogue that happens in the film also that almost gives it like a Brazil type of feeling. So I would say kind of like Suspiria meets Brazil in a film about a haunted dress. That's my like short review take on this one. It's definitely going to take a little bit more brain power. It's not a just sit back and let the whole movie tell itself to you type of thing. You got to pay attention. You got to put some things together. But it does a really good job. And we all really enjoyed it. We got to the end of the movie and everybody was kind of like, wow, that was weird, but like in a really good way. And I really liked it. So it's sexy, it's scary, it's funny, it's really interesting, it's really artistic. So if any of that floats your boat, you definitely want to check out In Fabric. We watched the unrated version, which was pretty graphic with the sex stuff. There was a scene where the gals from the store are basically having sex with a mannequin that was very interestingly graphic for a sex with a mannequin scene. So I'm going to leave it there and not tell you anything more about this movie, but hopefully I've piqued your curiosity. And if I have, you check out In Fabric. And of course, let me know what you think of the movie, especially if you watch it on my recommendation. All right, that is it for this week of Cinema Club. I am going to sign off here, but of course, please let me know what you've been watching, or if you have any recommendations for me of something cool to watch, I would love to hear it. I will be back in a few more days with another episode of my vlog. I believe I'm going to be doing an unboxing for our brand new game, Dungeon Breakout, so stay tuned for that. And until then, everybody stay safe and take care, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later.